So let's talk about Justice League, the new movie from director Zack Snyder, who I like to call Zack Schneeder, and Joss Whedon. But for simplification, I'm going to call the director of this movie Zack Whedon and just put the two of their names together. So, do I like the movie? Do I not like the movie? That's a very complicated question for such a simple movie. Because despite the movie being bad in so many ways, just from a basic filmmaking standpoint, there's scenes in this movie that are just bad. Like the dialogue's bad, the editing's bad, the establishing shots really aren't there. You never get a good sense of geography or a sense of time and all that. You know what I mean? Like you need to know where your movie's at and where it's going and what kind of makes sense. But the movie jumps around like crazy. And that's typical for a Zack Snyder movie. He did that with Man of Steel. He did that with Batman v Superman. He did that with Sucker Punch. He's been doing it for years now. If you've followed my other videos, you know I'm not a fan of him as a filmmaker. So if you're one of those people that does love the new DC films and you love Snyder, then I'm sorry, this isn't going to be the video for you. And that's fine. If you like those movies, that's cool. Like, I'm not trying to knock people who like Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. I think they're awful. And despite having some good bits, like really, some good scenes are in both of those movies, for the most part, that's just indulgent, overlong crap with a lack of logic. And I, in particular, didn't like how Batman and Superman came off like total morons in the last movie. But this is a new day. It's a new movie. We live in a post-Wonder Woman world, right? And due to the tragedy of Zack Snyder's daughter, Joss Whedon comes in for some planned reshoots that were already, thought up with the rewrites that he put into the screenplay, originally written by Chris Terrio of Argo fame, who's now 2 for 2 writing a really crappy comic book movie. So I think he just needs to stop. So Whedon comes in, and at first we hear, oh, it's just going to be some reshoots to tighten the movie up again and help the tone and make it funnier. Okay, now we're reading that they just cut a 3-hour movie down to a 2-hour movie, and if you see the film, it's very clear that Whedon's directing at least 30% of it. At least 25 to 30% of this movie, if not more, are scenes with Joss Whedon. And it you can tell, because it's just two different styles. You can tell when Joss Whedon's shooting a scene because of his lighting and framing, and you can tell when Zack Snyder's doing it because of his lighting and framing. I mean, it's easy to tell. That doesn't mean that the two don't mix well. The juxtaposition's actually not as jarring as I thought it was going to be. You can mix his action scenes and his kind of dry, toneless exposition with Whedon's fun sense of camp, in a sense. That's kind of what he's going for here. Kind of a big-budget cartoon. So the first hour of the movie is just downright terrible. I mean, I'm just going to say it. It's bad. It's boring. It's really boring. Oh my god. It's so there's like one scene I kind of liked in the first hour, but basically Steppenwolf, one of my favorite bands. It was really cool to see him in this movie. I'm a big fan of Born to Be Wild and Magic Carpet Ride. They come into this movie and they start going around and collecting the mother boxes, which if all are collected, they're going to be able to pretty much be a god and destroy the universe and all that. So Steppenwolf goes and jacks the mother box from the Amazons and just beats the crap out of them. He's just smacking the bitches around like they don't matter. And then he goes and takes the mother box from Aquaman and Atlantis and just kicks his butt. Legit, the bad guy in this is so OP and generic and looks like a video game character in CG, and the only thing about him that stands out is that he's stronger than all the other characters in the movie outside of Superman, which, spoiler, Superman's in this movie, but that's obvious in all the trailers, so no spoiler. Anyway, Superman died in the last movie, so everyone's upset. They live in a post-Superman world, and Batman feels guilty. The world's a bad place now because Clark's dead. Clark, my friend. You mean that guy the whole last movie that you were a dick to for no reason, and then all of a sudden in the last 10 minutes you guys become buddies because you share the same, your mother share the same name? Alright, I'll go with that. So Batman in this is just brooding and old and boring because Ben Affleck's boring as Batman. Good casting, bad acting. It's basically how I sum it up. So Gal Gadot, Gal Gadot, Gal Gadot, Gal Gadada, Gal Gadooba Dooba. She's pretty early on in the movie. She has this action scene where she stops some terrorists who are going to blow up all these people, and she like throws the bomb out. And this scene feels very Zack. And it's actually not too bad. It's pretty fun. It's not as interesting as any of the scenes Patty Jenkins did in Wonder Woman, But like I said, it's not bad, and I wasn't even the world's biggest Wonder Woman fan, so it's not like I just love that movie and it's like, oh, this can't compete with that. It's like, this it's got its own charm. It's fluffy in a way that the other DC films aren't. Then we go to Gotham City with Batman, and he's fighting off aliens, and he's all like, "Hey, evil's coming. We got to stop them, Alfred." And it's like, okay. And Danny Elfman, who did the score to this movie, and he's just ripping off his score from the Hulk movie. It's legit like the same score from Ang Lee's Hulk. It's weird. And then he actually uses cues from his Batman '89 score. They use that in the movie a few times to be like, hey, remember that great theme that you love? It's like Batman. See, Batman's in this movie, Batman. I mean, it couldn't have been any more obvious. And J.K. Simmons in this, what the heck? What a waste. A lot of his stuff must be on the cutting room floor. You can just tell they cut a bunch of stuff out. But I have a feeling all the stuff they cut was horrible. Like, when you watch the movie, it's not like you're like, there's a bunch of scenes I wish I could see. Which is what a lot of the Zack Snyder fans are saying. They think the studio and Whedon ruined the movie. And I'm just sitting here going, thank God you cut all that boring, terrible stuff that was most likely in this movie. Because you just see the remnants of it in scenes that go on that are just painful to watch. Scenes with Martha Kent and Lois Lane where they have no personality because Snyder didn't establish a personality with these characters. There's no tone really. I mean, you can just tell what he was doing, and you could tell that he was making a mess of a movie, which they said was borderline unwatchable, and it feels that way. The first hour of this movie is just kind of unwatchable. I mean, you can sit there and watch it, but it's just a dry thing. It's Batman trying to recruit them. There's no energy. The bad guy doesn't make any sense. He just shows up. They don't establish him. They don't really give him a motivation and explain who he is. He just shows up and he's like, hey, I'm going to take over the world and then do this. He's very close to the Dark Elf bad guy from Thor, The Dark World, which is one of the worst villains I've ever seen. He's on par with that, where it's like, wow, you're just terrible, generic villain. Like, what the hell, man? It's a Justice League movie. You can't make the villain even halfway interesting. How am I supposed to be compelled that these characters have to team up and fight this guy when he's just a video game boss? And that's really all he ever ends up being. So the first hour of the movie, like I said, really slow, really aimless. Not a lot of good dialogue. Not very funny. Not very well acted. I was shocked how mediocre the acting was at first. I did like Jason Momoa as Arthur Curry and as Aquaman quite a bit. He was having a lot of fun, even though he's just like a total nihilist. He doesn't give a crap about anything. He's just like, I don't care if the ocean dies and all this. I'm like, what? And yeah, Ben Affleck's just phoning it in here. Ezra Miller tries. He is a really good actor. I like him in Perks of Being a Wallflower, and we need to talk about Kevin and a lot of other movies, but they don't give him a lot of depth here emotionally. Billy Crudup comes in to play his father, who's always good. But they just make him the funny guy, and he feels like he got a lot of the Whedon dialogue. Like, he gets a lot of quips, and I guess he's supposed to be the one you relate to, but a lot of that fell flat for me. I didn't hate Ezra Miller in this movie. I thought he was okay. But it just wasn't... It should have been better. The Flash should have stole the movie and been really funny and really good, but there's just a few lines of dialogue that are funny. That's really all there is. It's like maybe 5 lines of dialogue in the movie are genuinely funny, and they all feel like Whedon wrote them. And the rest of it's just kind of like, yeah, you probably should have cut that line. Or like he didn't have a lot of time to flesh out. I was shocked because I thought Joss Whedon was just going to kill it on that stuff because he has the background in writing in comics. He did television. He's great with ensemble pieces. It really makes sense for him to be doing a Justice League movie as much as it made sense for him to be doing the Avengers. I thought what he would capture was something like Justice League Unlimited, which was very similar in its structure and kind of what it did with its character arcs. And even the people who worked on Justice League Unlimited said they were influenced by Joss Whedon in a lot of ways, and you can tell. But man, the first hour, it's just a drag. I mean, I could have walked out of the theater. I was having such a lame time. I just wasn't having any fun. And, because it's just a movie that's like, we got to get the team together, it's the Magnificent Seven. It's Seven Samurai. So, it's really just him going around trying to get everyone together and explain to them what's going on. And it's so rushed, and you didn't spend any time. It really showed you how establishing these characters would have been a good idea. Like, if we'd already known Aquaman better, and if we'd have known Barry Allen better, and if we had known Alfred even better, who's barely in Batman v Superman, the only characters that we really got to know is Bruce Wayne, Batman, and kind of Clark Kent, Superman, Lois Lane, but not really. So for a lot of this movie, you're just kind of sitting there going, well, it's a movie, but nothing's really happening. There's not a plot. There's really not even a slight plot. It's very much a plotless movie, which the Avengers was too. But the Avengers, it was like, oh, okay, I see how Captain America is being brought in because of what happened with him being frozen, and I see why they're bringing Tony Stark in, and then the Hulk's coming in because the government knows about the Hulk, and I get why Black Widow and Hawkeye work for Shield, so this all makes sense. So it was fun seeing them come together. You got those really fun scenes like with Mark Ruffalo and Scarlett Johansson. This movie for that first half, I would say is a total failure. Like artistically, the fun factor's not there, and it is. It's just dull. And visually, it's flat as hell, which is very shocking to me, even for Zack Snyder. One thing I liked about Batman v Superman was the cinematography by Larry Fong, who's a great DP. And I actually really did like the lighting and framing of a lot of the shots of the movie. Not the last half hour CG battle, but that first hour and a half, I really did. I liked how Gotham City looked. I really liked how the interiors were shot. I thought the special effects looked really good. It looked like an expensive movie. I hated the cinematography in Man of Steel, but that was Snyder trying to be Terrence Malick or do something more artsy, or even Ridley Scott, perhaps. A lot of it looked like Prometheus. I hate how that film looks, but I really did like the look of Batman v Superman. I like Larry Fong's work with Snyder. For the most part, I like the look of 300 and Watchmen. I like the costume design in Watchmen. I think he got Watchmen totally wrong. I don't think he understood why Watchmen was great. But there's still a lot of cool stuff in that movie, and some really good acting in that movie, and some well-directed scenes. So I was hoping that this movie, at its best, would kind of hint at that side of Zack Snyder. Unfortunately, this is like the most bland thing he's done in a while. There's really, it's the cinematographer who shot some episodes of Game of Thrones. He worked on Hard Home and Battle of the Bastards. His work really doesn't stand out, and he's a very good cinematographer. But the movie is flat visually. It looks like it's all on sound stages. I mean, there's no scale to the movie. It barely looks like they're at a location. Sometimes it looks like they're on a location shooting, and that stuff looks pretty decent. But even the beginning of this movie, the opening credits, is Snyder trying to be David Fincher again, which is all he ever tries to do, is be David Fincher. He's like, hey, let me do this artistic opening credit sequence where I make a social commentary and I put it together like a music video. I did the same thing in Watchmen. I'm a genius. And it just comes off indulgent. Legit, I was sitting there just thinking, like, oh, you're trying to be David Fincher. Oh, he's clever with his opening credits and all of his movies. Okay. The difference is that David Fincher's like a very intelligent guy and a very knowledgeable guy on not just the technical aspects, but also storytelling and themes and understanding it and what makes a movie work. He's terrific with actors. Zach, unfortunately, is still lacks any depth. He hasn't grown as a filmmaker at all. If anything, he's gone backwards from Dawn of the Dead. Dawn of the Dead feels like a much more mature movie, and from a more serious filmmaker than anything he made after. It's kind of like how Michael Bay's early work was fun, and then as he went on, his films just became... They weren't even movies anymore. They're just like 3-hour messes of things slapped together. That's how Zack Snyder's movies are anymore. They're just slapped together. And he used to be able to tell a story. Even if you didn't like his films, they had really decent structure, and you could at least follow the story. You could do that with his early movies. And I know a lot of people hate 300 and all that, and I get it, but it's pretty loyal to Miller's vision in the comic book. And yeah, you can follow it. They're going to go fight they're going to go fight the 300, and then that's what the movie is. They go fight, and then they die. That's pretty much it. It's very simple. Like, when his movies are simple, it works. It's when he tries to make them complex. That's why Sucker Punch is a total failure. That's why Batman v Superman's a failure. Whenever he tries to get into politics or look at the world we live in or take anything from literature or history like that, it just falls completely flat because he just looks at it on the surface level. He never really finds a unique take on it because he doesn't have anything to say. He just takes things from other people who have stuff to say and thinks if he puts it in his movies, that'll make his movies deep. But that's not what makes a movie deep. So let's get to the good, because there is good. That's the shocking part about this. Over halfway into the movie, I'd say an hour and 10 minutes, maybe a little bit later than that, is the first scene of the movie I actually like. And I like it a lot. Like, I have no problem saying that this scene, not the entire sequence itself, but this moment in it is great. and it feels completely like it was from the mind of Joss Whedon, and it feels like something that could have been in a comic book or the animated show. It's so good, it makes me angry because the rest of the movie around it's so mediocre and just lifeless that there's that one little bit where it goes, man, that's so. I won't spoil it, but I'll give you a hint. The Flash runs into the speed zone, as he calls it, throughout the movie, and he's basically like autistic in this movie, The Flash. It's really weird. I don't know. Or like his mind works really fast or something. I'm not sure. They don't really spend that much time with the characters. It would have helped this movie so much more had you just had more dialogue with the characters explaining, their lives and what they feel and how they feel about their powers and all that. It just in fact, I don't dislike the scene where he goes to get Ezra Miller, Barry Allen, but you pretty much saw it in the trailer, and it's all the scenes. What's your superpower? I'm rich. And Affleck looks so weird in this movie. It's like you think his face looks weird, though. God, Henry Cavill. That opening scene with Superman, because if you don't know, he had a mustache for another movie, and then they digitally removed it for this film, which I think they should have just kept it. I think Superman with the mustache would have looked kind of awesome. But oh my god, you can tell when they digitally removed it, and it looks awful. His teeth look weird, his lips look weird. I don't know why it looks so bad for like a $300 million movie. It should really look great. Like, it shouldn't be that hard of a thing to do, and it looks like a bad special effect. It was really jarring. And the unfortunate thing is, to me, Superman steals this movie. That was the shocking thing. The scene that I really liked has Superman in it, because spoilers, obviously, Superman comes back, and it's all about the team having to bring Superman back. They realize the only way they're going to beat Steppenwolf is with Superman, because he's just kicking the rest of their butts. So there's a little stretch of the movie where they're trying to bring Superman back, and he comes back fast. And then he just starts beating up everyone like he doesn't give a damn. And it's the first time in these DC films, in the DC cinematic universe, that Superman felt like Superman to me. I know some people think he feels that way in the last few minutes of Man of Steel, and I get that, like when he goes and talks to the military and all that, and he's all like, hey, and he has the flag and all that. But for such a lack of him feeling like Superman through those movies, and Zack Snyder just really not getting it down visually and what we like about Superman, him doing these Dragon Ball Z fights that go on for 45 minutes and just having him brood, man, kudos to Joss Whedon. You got to give him credit. If there's one thing he knows why we like these characters. He's the one guy that got the Hulk really right. Until recently, but what he did with the Avengers, he got the right tone for the Hulk. And he nails it here with Superman. That scene that I love is the Flash is running in the speed zone while Superman's fighting everyone else. And then the Flash sees something. And I won't tell you what that is, but that moment when the Flash realizes what's going on in that sequence, it reminded me of what Bryan Singer did in Days of Future Past with Quicksilver, but he kind of does a reverse with that. He kind of does the opposite of what he did, where it's all about from like the humor from Quicksilver's point of view as everyone else is kind of frozen. What Whedon does in this sequence, in a brilliant shot, the best shot of the movie, is this moment where the Flash realizes, like, oh my god, I am screwed. And it's funny, it's on the, man, it's so good. I wish I could talk about it. Like, I just don't want to spoil it for you if you haven't seen the movie. But that moment it's great. It's literally a great comic book moment. It gives you what you've been wanting out of these films for so long, and it feels just right, and it's epic, and it shows you the power level of everyone and really shows you the difference of power levels. It ends the debate that Batman could beat Superman even with prep time. I mean, Superman just beats, because Superman's always holding back. He holds back in the comics, he holds back in the cartoon, he holds back in the movies. It's one of the greatest scenes in Justice League Unlimited. I think it's even the finale where he says, I'm living in a world of cardboard, and then he actually uses his full strength. This is that kind of moment where you're like, wow, man, this is Superman. Just clever stuff with this flying and his strength. So good. That whole sequence really is good, but there's 2 or 3 moments in it that are great. And at that point, I was back in the movie. After an hour of being bored, just straight up bored, and kind of half into it, that got me right back in. I was like, whoa, wait a minute, this movie just opened up. Unfortunately, after that, it goes back to being a mess. the first hour feels like Snyder, and the second half feels like Whedon. But then there's a point after that Superman scene where it feels like it's cutting back and forth between Zack and Joss, and you can tell it's almost like within scenes, like just from the lighting, you can tell who directed what. And unfortunately, Joss Whedon's always kind of had this big budget television style. Even with the first Avengers in particular, had that issue where it looked like a big budget TV movie. And the sequences he directs here kind of have that too, where it feels like a big budget TV pilot. Which I've always felt that way about Whedon. He doesn't have that great of a visual eye. It's just not. He's a good director. He's just not very cinematic visually, and he never was. Even because his background was television, and he just still kind of has that in his bones, unfortunately. But that doesn't bother me. I would have had no problem. The Avengers is very flat visually, and I still really like that movie because of the dialogue and keeping it small. He's like, hey, let's just keep this on small sets and make it about the character dialogue. And for the most part, that's what works best about this movie, too. When the characters are just hanging out, talking about what's going on and making a plan, that's the best stuff in the movie for the most part. Like, because Jason Momoa is actually really good in this, has a lot of charisma. And I liked Wonder Woman. I liked seeing Wonder Woman in the Flash and Batman, and Cyborg surprisingly is really good in this. Don't get me wrong, he still looks terrible. He still looks like Megatron. And there's a hilarious scene where it's pretty much a moment from the first Transformers movie with Megatron and the character Jazz, and I was like, oh, that's funny. But he's actually the actor in this. He's really good. He's a good actor, and his backstory, where he basically doesn't want to be the cyborg, and his father put him in the situation to save him. And apparently, a lot of that got left on the cutting room floor, and I feel like it was probably terrible. But I am fascinated to see the Zack Snyder cut of this movie. I hope on DVD we get to see that stuff. But man, I gotta say, like, he came in with a lot of charisma, and he's very useful to the group. They give him a lot to do. He can run all of the machines. He can help them with the computers and information. It's actually one of the more clever aspects of the movie is how Cyborg gets stuff done. And then at the end of the movie, he's like having sex with one of the mother boxes to try to save the world. So for that, there's about a half hour that the film starts to kind of be meh again, where it's not really working. And Steppenwolf has all the mother boxes now, and Superman goes off to he goes back home with Lois Lane, I guess, to have sex for a while. That's basically how I read the scene, is he wanted to go bust a nut and then come back and fight. Henry Cavill, man, he's smiling. He's smiling with that horrifying computer smile, but oh my god, it's so nice to see. He's got a pretty smile. No one brings that up like Henry Cavill. He's a very handsome guy, and he's a very funny guy, and he was very good in Man from U.N.C.L.E. And if you have him smile and be funny and have a good time, even though he's not the world's greatest actor, he can still pull off aspects of Superman. This was the first time in all of these films I bought him as Superman. And don't get me wrong, he's not giving a great performance. It's the tone that Whedon establishes with that Superman and how he uses him visually and physically that makes it work. But it shows you that Henry Cavill could have been a good Superman with a different director. Like, this proves completely that it was all Zack Snyder's fault. I mean, it really does. Even the bad screenplays that David Goyer wrote and Chris Terrio wrote. It's like he hates Superman, or he doesn't get Superman. Another thing I hated in this movie is Batman's whole thing throughout the years is always that they're like, hey dude, you're just a guy, what do you contribute to the team? They do this in the animated series a lot, and the Batman does something awesome to show them what he contributes to the team. He does something so epic, and he outsmarts everyone, and he makes the plans. They don't really have that moment in here. Like, when I actually thought they did pretty good with Batman and Batman v Superman, the Batman scenes, even though his logic for fighting Superman's completely stupid, and it makes no sense that Batman would fall for this, the world's greatest detective, but none of the movies care about Batman being a detective, apparently. But this film, what sucks is Batman's old and weak and not very good, and that's just kind of how it plays out throughout the whole movie. Like, he doesn't really get his moment to shine. He has a harder time fighting than everyone. He really doesn't make the master plan. His best contribution is he comes up with bringing Superman back, really. And he's the one that has a plan and keeps them together, I guess. But I felt like Batman really got sold short. I can see why Ben Affleck doesn't want to play this part anymore. Because after playing the part for 2 movies, I don't know. I don't like that this is the Dark Knight version of Batman. This is the Frank Miller, older Batman. I didn't need the older Batman who's there's a moment that Alfred says to him, it's it's not you, it's the team or something like that. It's not backup, it's the team. And he's like, it's good to see you working with others again and stuff like that. And those moments are nice because they hint at the Robins and Nightwing, and I'm really excited about a Nightwing movie down the road. But it all just doesn't feel fleshed out. They didn't flesh out this world enough. They expect that you know everything about Batman already, which we do, but you still need to give me a sense of who this Batman is, and we just haven't spent a lot of time with the guy. Batman v Superman, this is a direct sequel, and it's all about his guilt over killing, well, not killing Superman, but basically contributing to everything that led to Superman's death. If Batman had just been smarter in the first part of that movie, nothing would have happened with Lenny Luthor and Doomsday and all that. But it just doesn't work because Batman v Superman wasn't very good, so a lot of this feels like they're trying to make up for mistakes like Days of Future Past did with Bryan Singer. But Days of Future Past, despite it kind of being jumpy in that way, Bryan Singer still made a very coherent film in the center of that. The stuff back in the 70s really does have a tone that kind of feels like Back to the Future or something like that. It's funny, it's engaging, it's got good character drama and acting. James McAvoy's very good, and it's simple. It's mainly about James McAvoy trying to save Jennifer Lawrence, Raven's soul, and get her to join him and find hope again. And it's got this interesting dynamic with Magneto in that. I really like Days of Future Past, but what it was trying to do is, hey, we got to fix all these mistakes we made and use time travel and all that. And they kind of try to do that here, like, hey, which it feels like the Flashpoint movie is coming 100%. They're going to do Flashpoint and just reestablish this entire universe, which at this point after this movie, they probably need to do because this movie isn't good enough to save DC right now. And you can already go look at how it's performing at the box office. Its opening day was $38 million, and it's not even estimated to open at $100 million opening weekend. Wonder Woman opened better than Justice League. That's pathetic, that's sad, that's disappointing, and that's a reflection of a poor marketing campaign. The poor reception after the fact, really, of Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, that those films have not held up for a lot of audiences. And this film is a result of that. And then this film gets mediocre reviews. It has 40% on Rotten Tomatoes, which I think is pretty fair. I think this film's like a 45-50% type movie. That makes the most sense, really. Man of Steel has like a higher rating than this, but I actually enjoyed this more than Man of Steel, but this is probably a worse movie. Man of Steel does have that first hour that's kind of coherent and decent until it gets that second half where it just becomes a really dragged out action film, and you're like, God, why can't this just be about Clark fighting Zod in Smallville and bringing it back home? Like, why do we have to go back to Metropolis and the city and all this stuff? Like, it'd be such a better movie if that final battle wasn't until like the last 15 minutes after you get to know the characters so well, and then have them fight in Smallville, which made a lot of sense, and then everyone in Smallville stands up for Superman and doesn't tell the world. I thought that was a good idea. It's about Clark realizing, hey, I'm Clark Kent, I am a man. But unfortunately, it's like, hey, we didn't have enough action. I mean, there's legit like a 40-minute battle in Man of Steel. I remember just sitting in the theater, like, being so bored during the second half of that movie. It's always fun. It feels like a Roger Corman movie at points. It feels like one of those. It looks cheap. It doesn't look like a $300 million movie. The special effects are not impressive. The CGI is not impressive. The costume design, the cinematography, nothing about it stands out. Thor Ragnarok looked much better than this movie. And Thor Ragnarok didn't cost about half as much as this movie, and it looked a lot better. Like, just the visuals, the CGI, everything looked better. The thing is, I don't think this film's going to outgross Thor Ragnarok or Spider-Man Homecoming and possibly Wonder Woman. This might make $800 million worldwide, but I don't think audiences are going to love this movie. They're going to like the second half and probably come out enjoying that and those aspects and the Superman stuff. And the final battle I liked a lot. A lot of people said it was just pure Zack Snyder, but I actually really dug the last battle, in particular when Superman shows up again. I thought that was the best representation of Superman since, like, Christopher Reeve. Like, there's so many moments visually, and it was like that video game Injustice, Gods Among Us, and it's just cool. It's just cool seeing Superman be Superman. And he's smiling and being nice and having fun, and like, oh my God, he's making jokes. It's just really nice in the teamwork and all that. So there's at least 15 minutes of this movie, I'd say, maybe even a little less than that, that's okay and solid. And if the whole movie had been like that, it'd be a pretty okay movie. it'd be like a 7, 7.5 out of 10. You know, it'd be one of those movies you're like, that was okay. Unfortunately, because you have that first hour that really drags it down, and Steppenwolf is such a terrible villain that really just takes all the tension out of everything. You know he's going to get his butt kicked. It just doesn't give the film a lot of pathos. It doesn't give it. The characters don't really have arcs, any of them for the most part. It's all about like, hey, we got to learn to work together as a team, which they don't really ever seem to have much issue with. They're always kind of helping each other. The surprising things about the movie, Cyborg's actually really good and likable in the movie. That was shocking. I will say that surprised me, and I like the angle they took with him not wanting to be the cyborg. Wonder Woman's a little underused in the movie, but she's fun. Actually, she's the one that has the most chemistry, I think, with Ben Affleck. And for sure, I think Jason Momoa, who's also underused, is kind of great in this. It makes me excited for the Aquaman movie. I've always liked him, but I never thought he was that great of an actor. He just can play Conan the Barbarian, basically. That's what he does in all of his shows and movies he's in. But he he showed a good knack here for playing like just kind of a guy. Like you bought him as this guy, and he was funny, and he was just charming. I didn't like him being like so nihilist for so much of it, but I don't know, he felt like a character. He really did. He felt like a like they did the things they do with Aquaman shouldn't work as well as they do, but they actually make you kind of want to see Atlantis more. You want to see more with Aquaman in the water. You just want more of Aquaman in general. Like, if there is a longer cut of this movie that does come out, I hope the things they include are more of Aquaman and Cyborg and that stuff, because that's the stuff that did kind of work, even from Snyder's version of the movie. The other stuff doesn't really work at all, and I was so disappointed in Batman in this. I just hated how the only thing I really kind of liked was his costume, but man, like he went from looking like Denny O'Neil's Bruce Wayne to I don't know what happened to Affleck. His face is so fat now. He looks like his face just looks awful. He looks old, and I just didn't like it. I wasn't too big of a fan of. And Affleck's never been a great actor anyway. But man, this was just like mediocre Batman. It's upsetting because Batman should be great and all the time. And I was hoping Whedon was going to do more with Batman. The stuff that Whedon seems to really get down is Superman, and he seems to understand the Flash, at least with the humor. Unfortunately, the Flash looks terrible when he runs. Ezra Miller can't run. I don't know what they were thinking. It's jarring to watch Ezra Miller run in this movie. He throws his arms out really in front of him forward, like he's swimming, and he leans forward. I mean, he doesn't run. He doesn't run with good form at all. It's a terrible looking run. It makes no sense because he's a guy who runs all the time, and it should look cool. But it's these shots Zack Snyder does where like there's these close-ups and side shots, and the Flash just doesn't look cool running. The TV show legit looks better when the Flash runs, the special effects and how they do it. It looks so much better. It's got a better sense of energy. It feels quicker. It feels more loyal to the comics. This is downright bad. Like bad, except for a few. There's a couple moments with the Flash, like I said, but those are like slow motion moments that happen. For the most part, anytime the Flash is like running or doing anything and you see him running, it looks so bad, and it like I said, it's just jarring. It looks like he's standing on like some treadmill green screen thing, not knowing how to run. I don't know if Ezra Miller's ever run in his life. And it's just strange. I think put someone else in the costume and let them run. Like holy crap, I mean, it's embarrassing to watch him run. There's like a narration at the end of the movie where like I think it's Wonder Woman or someone's talking over all this stuff, and they're showing everyone, and they're talking about heroes and all that stuff, and they just show the Flash running, and it's like, oh, that looks so bad. It looks so bad. It's funny. Um, Man, a lot of this looked cheap though. That's what shocked me the most. Is like, I guess it's just two directors clashing, so there's never a sense of vision on the set, probably. But even for Zack Snyder, this is like I said, this is one of his most dull looking films. That's what really surprised me is how dull it looked. I at least thought well, this it's going to be a good looking movie. But no, it's got a lot of the same problems Suicide Squad had. It just jumps around. The editing's all over the place. They don't really give you a lot of character development. It's more about let's get to the point. The good guys teaming up to fight the bad guys. In fact, this is very similar to Suicide Squad. It just doesn't have as much cringe, like with Jared Leto, and it doesn't have all those crazy like little editing things that company did who edited that movie. Um, it's still this is still kind of a poorly edited film. Don't get me wrong, like it's not put together very well, but it doesn't necessarily need to be. Like it didn't need to have good editing and a great script. Like it kind of works in this. I don't know. It's like a B movie. It kind of works in this very cheesy, stupid way. It reminded me more of a '90s superhero comic book film than a modern one. Like it took me back to when I saw Batman Forever in the theater, and I still think Batman Forever has a charm about it, kind of that it is so goofy and stupid. And yeah, it reminded me more of that. It reminded me of the silly era of comic book movies and when they were still trying to figure it out. It feels like a Justice League movie that would have been made in the late '90s or early 2000s. It really doesn't feel like a modern movie at all. And that's something I liked about it. I did like that about the movie. And I did like the cast. I think the actors all did as good as they could do with the circumstances. I don't think they had much of a screenplay. I don't think Chris Terrio had too much of a script for them. And I don't think Whedon had much for them either. I think, because Whedon's a dialogue guy, and he spends, he spent months working on the Avengers and a bunch of other, and all of his other projects he spends a long time on. This is just so slapped together, and it's tough, and you could tell it's tough for him to kind of try and reestablish these characters that have been poorly handled up until this point. And it's got surprises. It's surprising that Cyborg is so likable. It's surprising that Superman's so cool in this movie. And those things are really really good, but there's too much CGI, way too much CGI. It's unforgivable. I mean, it hurts the entire movie. It makes it look like a video game. There's a lack of humanity to the movie because you need to have more stuff on location, more of them. The scenes wherever they're just in a building in their costumes talking look better than any of the action scenes with all the CGI. Like when it's just them hanging out in like the Batcave and all that, that stuff looks pretty good because it looks real. It looks like you can touch it and all that. But then, everything else, yeah, nothing looks real. It never feels like they're on Earth. It never feels like it's real. And it should feel somewhat real. It doesn't have to feel totally real. I get that, but it should have just a hint of reality to it. And there's rarely a moment in this movie where it doesn't feel like there's a green screen behind the actors or that there isn't a CG effect within the frame. I mean, it's over and over and over, and you have to keep being reminded of the special effects. They don't seamlessly blend into everything. I mean, for the most part, one special effect will look good and then something else won't look as good. Like, the Flash looks terrible when he runs because of how Ezra Miller runs. The special effect doesn't look bad, but his running's so bad, it ruins the special effect from really standing out. And that's an issue. There's a lot of that in this movie where something looks cool or is a cool idea, but then they don't execute it visually. I don't know what happened with Schneider here. It's like he lost all of his abilities as a director. Like it's like he doesn't care. It's like he's sad making this movie. It's a very sad movie. I mean, it made me sad the first half. Then out of nowhere in the second half, it gets energy. Man, that moment. The one moment Whedon does, man, just the eyes turning. It's so cool. Commissioner Gordon, J.K. Simmons, yeah, wasted. He's only in like 2 scenes. He's really good in the scenes I saw him in. I hope he's in the Batman a lot. But I wish he was in it more involved with the team. I wish he was part of the team helping them. Not fighting, but, giving them the information and all. He's just kind of there to help them a couple times. Don't have J.K. Simmons in your movie and waste him. I would much rather spend time with J.K. Simmons and this team hanging out than spend any time with Steppenwolf or any of that boring crap where Steppenwolf is just beating everyone up. My favorite sequence with Steppenwolf doing the fighting like that is the Amazon one. I do kind of like that scene because there is something clever with it where he's trying to get the mother box and they have to keep getting the mother box ahead of him and trying to keep in front of him and run. And that's actually pretty cool. It's actually kind of tense because you realize how strong he is. I did like that moment. That moment of that sequence. I didn't like the whole sequence, but that was kind of cool. Then he keeps teleporting, like Thor does. I just kept thinking Thor. I mean, I know DC has their own stuff, but it just kept me. He's got a box and he's being teleported. It's like, oh wow, this is just like Thor. But I think people are gonna enjoy the movie, like audiences, even though it only has like a B rating cinema score. But I think people are gonna come out happy because of the Superman stuff. And it's not an offensive movie. It's just kind of there for a lot of it, which is its biggest issue. It lacks character. But you can watch it, it's watchable. You could tell how Zack Snyder was making an unwatchable movie, but Whedon does come in and try to make it somewhat watchable, and his tone's just a lot better. And they tried to get that tone with the editing, and it is there. It is a lighter tone, and it is fun. It's a big dumb goofy movie that doesn't care if it's smart. It doesn't care about plot. It doesn't care about character, and it's the first film to really embrace that aspect. It's not pretending that it's a genius serious film like Batman v Superman did, like it actually has something to say. It doesn't care that it has anything to say. Justice League just wants to exist as a team up movie. It's like action figures fighting each other. You could see a kid making this movie up with his toys. And that part of it is charming, and I do think works. And to my surprise, I didn't hate this movie. It's not a good movie. In fact, in many ways, it's a really bad movie, but it's entertaining, and that goes a long way for me if I'm entertained by a movie. And I did have a lot of fun, and I don't think it was worth paying $10 to go see. So if you do go see this movie or ever watch it, I would recommend watching it on television or renting the movie. Or if you are going to go see it, go to a matinee. I would not pay full price for this. My arbitrary rating for Justice League is going to be a very nice 6. I think the other Zack Snyder films in the DC universe are like 4 or 5s. This one I'm going to be very generous and give it a 6. It's a bad movie, but it's entertaining like a 6 or even a 6.5. Like when it was over, all I thought about was, you know what, that second half, actually how that moved and all that really did work for me. It is rushed. They just jump around. The characters jump around. Someone's here, they're here. Martha Kent's here, then she's here. Lois Lane is here, then she's here. Batman's here, 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 here. I don't mind Superman being that way, but everyone in this movie's that way. They just jump around, and the movie jumps around all over the place. And yeah, you just, unfortunately, the work is you never really get a sense of time, of the time passing. It feels like the movie's constantly stuck kind of in this bubble of that it lacks forward momentum, because every time it kind of gets momentum going, the editing hurts that, and it reinvents itself again, and then you lose the flow. The only scene that kind of flows really well, I feel, is the Superman sequence in the middle. That all kind of feels really organic and flows well. The beats of that sequence, the actual logic of bringing Superman back and all that is so contrived and cheap. But I'll let that pass, because they're like, we shouldn't have killed Superman off in a second movie. We need to bring Superman back. Which, by the way, you just wasted the death of Superman, which could have been a really powerful moment in a future DC film. But because of the terrible choices they made in Batman v Superman, you're just going to have to throw that out the window. Lois Lane's just kind of here, Amy Adams. Like, always attractive, always really good performance, from her. She's never bad in anything, but she's just kind of here. She feels a little pointless except for one scene that she used for. Yeah, it's you don't really get why the team's together. You don't really get how, because the only explanation is like, hey, he found that thumb drive of heroes and he's going to collect them, and it's like, oh my god. And the Flashpoint thing is definitely coming, because there was in Batman v Superman, there was the moment with the Flash coming to talk to Batman, so it feels like they're trying to build up to going back to that. And I think Flashpoint could actually be a cool movie, seeing the Flash go through different versions of the DC universe, multiple versions of Batman. Like, could you imagine if that would be really cool if he actually saw multiple versions of these characters, and then we could get all these different eras of Batman and Superman. And this is closer to the Silver Age than anything. This is very Silver Age superheroes. It's goofy in that way, and it does go back to the simple era of comic books before the writers came in and really added some depth to the characters and the storylines and the villains. This is more back to an old comic book back in the day. You pay your nickel or your dime and you read it, and it's fun, and it helps you escape for a little while, and you leave your concerns behind. It takes you out of your concerns of your everyday life. And this movie, at its best, attempts to do that, but it's still, sadly, due to the editing and the two visions clashing and just a lack of a story, really. There's not much of a story or plot here. It's not much of a movie. It's more of a collection of scenes than a movie. But in comparison to the collection of scenes that was Suicide Squad or Batman v Superman or a Michael Bay movie, this is a lot better than most. And I do think people are going to be surprised how much they like it. All the people are saying it's terrible because of the studio and Whedon ruining Snyder's vision. I'm sorry you feel that way. I feel like that first hour is a reflection of Snyder's vision, and I didn't like it. I thought that was the worst part of the movie, and I don't think he proved himself at all to earn that, to make this movie. I don't think he should have been hired back for the sequel to Man of Steel, and I don't think he should have been hired to come on to Justice League. And the proof's in the pudding, guys. You have three films now with mediocre to bad reviews, and each one of them's disappointed at the box office. They expected Man of Steel to make $1 billion. It made under 700 mil. They certainly expected Batman v Superman to make $1 billion. Made 870 million, and had an opening weekend that was great, 166 million. And now he's made Justice League, and it's also gotten bad reviews, and is opening under 100 million. So I'm thinking Snyder being gone because of the tragedy of his life it's just a blessing for Warner Brothers. It's not a good thing that happened at all, but they should have done this a while ago. They should have let this guy go a while ago. Someone else should have made this movie. And it's reflective of the film itself. This should have been a movie that opened at least to 150 million and made $1 billion. Now it's looking like a film that might not even reach 800 million unless the foreign box office is just huge on the movie. But the domestic total is going to be disappointing. I'm not even sure this is going to make 300 million. Because I think a lot of people are going to come out and they're not going to understand half the movie. Because, like I said, it jumps around so much, and your common moviegoer, your average audience member, they don't like stuff like that. It's going to confuse them. I was able to still kind of follow it because I know the history of the production and I kind of knew what they were going for. But if you're just going in blind just to go see a fun comic book movie, go see Thor Ragnarok. That's a movie that's really stupid, that doesn't have much of a plot, but it's fun and has great style and energy, and the details are really good. This, unfortunately, it just doesn't have the charm, and that's what sucks. So yeah, it's a 6 out of 10. It's just mediocre. It's boringly mediocre. It's not the worst superhero movie. It's not one of the worst superhero movies, but it's also not a good, great superhero movie or one of the better ones. And it should be, because it's the Justice League. This should be, this should be at least on an entertainment level, like an 8 or 9 out of 10. This should be great just to see these characters together. But there's not enough of that. And there's just not enough focus on the right dramatic elements to give it just give you that what you want out of a movie. You want to be engaged and go somewhere. You want to go on a journey. This film doesn't really take you on a journey. It just gives you a bunch of ideas and a bunch of stories and a bunch of things slapped together, and it isn't all coherent like it should be. It's more coherent than I was expecting it to be, and I do give credit to everyone who worked on that, because this film could have been messier for sure. And I understand why they wanted to keep it at around 2 hours. I think they should have probably went more for like 2 hours and 15 minutes. I don't know if you had to go this short. I think you could have made it a little bit longer, because it does feel like it wraps up very quickly after a point. But I don't know. Leave your opinion in the comment section. I'm sorry if you're a fan of these DC films and you feel like they betrayed you and they took away Snyder's vision. But you have to understand how they feel. They're not getting their returns financially that they expect, and they're not getting them again and again. And then Patty Jenkins does Wonder Woman, and it does give them the returns they want. Even Suicide Squad made more profit than Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. It made a lot more profit. So is Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman's going to make more profit, and I think that's kind of the nail in the coffin for Zack. It's there. If his movies were still making money, like Michael Bay made those terrible Transformers films, but the third film and the fourth film made $1 billion worldwide. So you're like, okay, they're making money. Zack doesn't have his movies don't make enough money to justify him working on these films, even if you're a big fan of him. He's just not getting the returns. So I just ask you to look at it from that point of view. But I blame Warner Brothers. I don't think they should have hired him to begin with. I think they've done a terrible job rushing these films. They've tried to rush to get to a Justice League film instead of establishing all of these characters and then making a Justice League movie that would have made, I think, $1 billion to $2 billion. Instead, you have a film that's probably not going to make $1 billion, and it's got Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, and Aquaman in it. There's no excuse for that. There's no excuse for this movie to be so mediocre. And all the money they spent on it, and all that time on reshoots and all that stuff, and it's still just such a mediocre movie, is a testament to how well the Disney machine is run. Because even when they make a mediocre film that's watchable, it's better than this movie. and it's better than the typical DC film outside of like Wonder Woman. So it's very telling that there was a lot of behind the scenes issues going on with this movie from the get go. It feels like they just rushed into production without much thought, and it's a thoughtless film, and a lot of people don't seem to care about that. They seem to not mind if a movie's really stupid and doesn't have anything going on, and they seem to, a lot of people do like Michael Bay movies, and they do like Zack Snyder, but it's just not for me. And I think Whedon saved this movie from being a total disaster that would have bombed even harder and made even less money. I think Whedon, the scenes he put in here, are going to somewhat save this movie, because without them, I think this might have opened even lower than that. I think this might have opened to 80 something million. I think people would have hated this movie. And it's just when you don't nurture your franchise and you don't take care of it. I thought that Wonder Woman, I'd said for months that I thought she was going to give it a boost financially and critically, and her character was really going to help everything after being in Wonder Woman. But this is still her being a lot of the direction here, and a lot of what's being said here is Zack Snyder, and it's still kind of the old days of DC. So hopefully after this movie with Nightwing and Wonder Woman 2 and Aquaman, they move on from this and go into a new era that's more entertaining. And I say just stick to the solo movies and quit making the team-up crossovers. I think just make your Aquaman movie, make your Wonder Woman movies. Let Superman have his own film franchise, and let us spend some damn time with Superman. I hate that Superman, it just gets overshadowed by all these other characters. And yeah, I think it's time for Affleck to go. And yeah, let's bring in the new Batman for Matt Reeves, because I think Affleck doesn't even want to be here. He seems bored. Which could work, I guess, in a different kind of movie. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. And please rewind your VHS tapes before you bring them back to the store.